Italy is known for its rich history, art, and landscapes, but like every country, it also faces tragedy, disaster, and moments of fear. When emergencies strike, Italians dial 112, the European emergency number, or specialized numbers such as 118, medical emergencies, 115, firefighters, and 113, police. Each year, millions of calls reach Italian operators. Some are routine, others, however, capture the raw intensity of human life at the edge of survival. Today, we revisit 10 real emergency calls from Italy, from earthquakes and fires to acts of heroism and survival. Story 1. The L'Aquila Earthquake, 2009. On April 6, 2009, a devastating earthquake struck the city of L'Aquila in central Italy. Thousands of people called 115 and 118 within minutes. One caller, trapped under rubble, whispered into the phone, "Please, I can't move. I'm under the ceiling." The dispatcher reassured him, marking his address for firefighters. Rescue teams later pulled dozens of survivors from collapsed buildings thanks to such calls. The L'Aquila earthquake killed more than 300 people, but many lived because they reached out in time and operators guided rescuers to precise locations. Story 2. The Costa Concordia disaster, 2012. On January 13th, 2012, the cruise ship Costa Concordia struck rocks off the island of Giglio and began sinking. Emergency numbers received desperate calls from passengers. "The ship is leaning, people are falling, we need help." One recording became infamous. Italian Coast Guard Commander Gregorio De Falco shouting at the ship's captain, "Get back on board, damn it!" after the captain abandoned the vessel. The calls that night revealed panic, confusion, and the bravery of rescuers who saved thousands of lives in freezing waters. Story 3. Genoa Bridge Collapse, 2018. On August 14, 2018, the Morandi Bridge in Genoa collapsed during a storm, sending cars and trucks plunging into the void. Drivers on nearby roads called 112, their voices shaking. "The bridge is gone." People are under the rubble. Witnesses gave detailed directions that helped emergency teams reach survivors trapped in vehicles. 43 people were killed, but the rapid coordination through emergency calls ensured dozens more were rescued from the dangerous wreckage. Story 4. Mount Etna Eruption Emergency. Italy's most active volcano, Mount Etna in Sicily, often forces emergency evacuations. In one eruption, a group of tourists caught in an ash cloud dialed 118. Through the crackling line, a man coughed. "We can't see, the ashes everywhere. Help us down." The dispatcher stayed calm, telling them to cover their mouths with clothing and keep moving downhill slowly. Mountain rescuers later found them, guided by the GPS trace of the call. Story 5. Venice Flooding, 2019. Venice is no stranger to high water, but in 2019, catastrophic flooding submerged much of the city. Residents trapped in their homes called 115, describing water levels rising above tables and electrical sparks. Dispatchers told them how to cut off power and climb to higher floors. Boats were dispatched using exact addresses given by callers. For many, those emergency calls were the only connection to the outside world as canals turned into raging rivers. Story 6. Child in Milan. Calls after mother faints. In Milan, a 9-year-old boy saved his mother's life with a call to 118. His voice shook, but he managed to tell the dispatcher, "My mom is on the ground. She's not waking up." The operator instructed him to check if she was breathing and begin chest compressions. By the time paramedics arrived, the boy had followed the steps perfectly, keeping her alive. The story spread widely in Italian news, praised as a lesson in the importance of teaching children to call emergency services. Story 7. The Bologna train station bombing, 1980. On August 2, 1980, a massive bomb exploded at Bologna's train station, killing 85 people and injuring over 200. The first calls to 113 were filled with confusion. "There's been an explosion. The whole station is destroyed." Dispatchers, overwhelmed by dozens of reports, immediately mobilized police, ambulances, and firefighters. The tragedy remains one of Italy's darkest terrorist attacks, and the emergency calls recorded that morning became chilling evidence of the horror. Story 8. The COVID-19 emergency in Lombardy, 2020. In early 2020, Italy became one of the first countries in Europe to face a devastating wave of COVID-19. The emergency line 118 in Lombardy received so many calls that operators sometimes answered hundreds per shift. One woman called, crying, "My father can't breathe. Please, we need an ambulance." Operators calmly guided families through first aid while dispatching limited resources. These calls became part of the collective memory of Italy's battle with the pandemic, symbolizing both human desperation and resilience. Story 9. Florence flood, 1966. Long before the age of mobile phones, the 1966 flood of the Arno River in Florence showed how vital communication was. Thousands of people, cut off by rising waters, used every available phone to call police and firefighters. One call from a museum worker described priceless artworks at risk. That plea helped authorities mobilize volunteers who became known as the Mud Angels, saving masterpieces from destruction. Story 10. Avalanche in the Gran Sasso, 2017. In January 2017, a deadly avalanche buried the Hotel Rigopiano in Abruzzo. Guests and staff were trapped under snow and debris. The first call came from a survivor outside the hotel. "The hotel is gone, buried by snow. Send help quickly." Later, faint voices were heard in calls from trapped victims. Rescuers, guided by these calls, worked for days in freezing conditions, eventually saving several people against all odds. From earthquakes to avalanches, from floods to terrorist attacks, these 10 real emergency calls from Italy reveal not only tragedy, but also resilience. On one end of the line, terrified voices crying for help. On the other, calm dispatchers, gathering vital details, sending hope through words alone. In Italy, as in the rest of Europe, 112 and its partner numbers are more than services. They are lifelines. And these stories remind us that sometimes the simple act of making a call can mean the difference between life and death.